Tuesday, January 13th, 2026, about 9:15 a.m. Turned on the news this morning and did not like what I saw. More protests in Minnesota and Minneapolis. I'm sure you all know what's been going on since the tragic killing of an American citizen named Renee Good uh, by Immigration and Customs law enforcement in Minneapolis. I'd like to give you some of my thoughts on what I think of this whole situation, including the shooting. I'll let y'all know up front, I'm a glasses half full type of guy. I believe that the overwhelming majority of Americans won't be taken to the streets any worse than what we saw a couple years ago with the George Floyd and Black Lives Matter protests. At least I hope not. I don't think so, because I believe most Americans are average, hardworking citizens such as myself. For the last 10 years, I've worked for the United States government defense contractor, helping build basically weapons of mass destruction. I don't build these weapons because I want to see them used. I build them not just to collect a paycheck, but I also build them for that one word that's called deterrence. The way I look at it is, I appreciate the fact that my kids sleep safe at night. So I'm building these weapons to scare the bad guys that would want to do us harm from ever even thinking about coming over here and attacking us. But let's be clear. Is what's going on in Iran right now, the protests against the government, the protests in other third world countries, is that possible here? Yes, it is. And why is that? Poor leadership. So let's ask a few questions. Is ICE, Immigration Customs Enforcement, and Border Control under the Trump administration breaking the law? Well, that's a good question. And my answer to that is, I would have to see clear evidence of unconstitutional profiling and search and seizures. Now, what I saw on the news this morning, what I've been seeing on the news the last couple of days, is sure a lot of what y'all have been seeing, is non-peaceful protesters interfering with law enforcement activity because they don't want ICE in their home. They don't want ICE ramping up productions in their hometown. That's understandable. But guess what that's doing? The non-peaceful part of the protest is actually making things unsafer, because you know what the Trump administration just announced last night? What they're doing this morning? They already have 2,000 ICE agents in Minnesota right now. They are sending an additional 1,000 now. They're ramping up their numbers for ICE enforcement by 50%. Why? Because they need to continue their operations as safely as possible. And they need extra man and women power to help deter the protesters who are interfering with their activities. Protesters are going to ICE facilities and obstructing their operations. You've probably even seen that some of the videos, they're even trying to impede them from getting gas at the gas station when they're fueling up their vehicles. So let's pump the brakes here. I'll tell you a little, unless y'all don't already know, I'll tell you a little bit about me. I'm not a Republican. I'm not a Democrat. I've been a registered independent since 2010. And that's the only party I plan on registering and staying registered in for the rest of my life. When it comes to politics, I believe in the George Washington, Jesse Ventura, Ross Perot side of politics. I don't like political parties. I know they serve a purpose, but I don't really like them. So, as you might assume, I have a lot of liberal friends. I have a lot of conservative friends. I have a lot of friends that hate Trump. I have a lot of friends that like Trump. And I have a lot of friends like me in the middle who, yeah, I don't particularly like Trump personally. You know, I feel that I probably know him, even though I've never met him. I probably know him better than most people because I, at one time, was also a two-bit hustler on the streets of Queens, New York. The only difference between me and him was he had daddy's money. He was flipping apartment complexes while I was flipping cheap plastic trinkets from China on the streets of Queens. You know what I'm saying? Now let's take a look at how we got to this situation. For those, let's say, who don't like Trump, and for those, let's say, who don't approve of the ramped up immigration policies of the Trump administration. If America was like a middle school, right? The people just elected, the people at that school basically just elected the schoolyard bully to lead it. That's what you have in President Trump. Not only is a slick shyster, a two-bit hustler, he's also the schoolyard bully. You know what I'm saying? But that's what the majority of American people wanted. That's who you put into power. Why? What I think is part of the reason why other developed countries in this world, not the third world countries, but more like the European countries, part of the reason why they snicker and they laugh at us behind the scenes over there across the pond is because they're like, man, that's the best you could do. You couldn't find nobody else to lead America besides that. To me, not only is a lack of leadership, you know, in government, in local municipalities, it's a lack of leadership on the kitchen table of every American family. Yeah, we're all responsible for this. Now, yeah, I did not vote for Trump. For the first time in my life in 2024, I wrote in a candidate. I wrote in Jesse Ventura for president. And I'm probably gonna in 2028, I'm probably gonna not like the candidates again, and I'm probably gonna continue writing in the name that I believe that could best lead this country. But when it comes to leadership, let's not kid ourselves. I don't care if you don't like Trump. He does have some leadership qualities. Now, I would never vote for him, but he does have some. You can't get to that position of power without some leadership qualities. You have to have people follow you. But the question is why do we keep lowering the bar for ourselves? And I think one answer is anger. Another answer is fear. And when you elect the schoolyard bully to run your country, that's why. Because you're angry and you're afraid. Now, you know what I'm saying? Let's go back to Minneapolis. I wrote my notes here so I don't, get off topic too much. Now, I have a lot of respect for law enforcement. Still to this day, still as I'm speaking to you right now. And I'm somebody who was beat up by the police twice in my life. Once 20 years ago, and the second time, was about 3 months ago. Yeah, and this time, the police beat me to within an inch of my life. I was not arrested. I was not charged with any crime. I was having an argument with my friend at a ritzy high-end restaurant in Florida. And, the guests, they asked me to leave, which I did. No punches were thrown. Nobody was assaulted, any of that. But after I left the restaurant, the ritzy restaurant they didn't want me in, one of the guests called the cops. So I'm in Florida, right? Walking down the street in this industrial district in an area that I've never been in before, trying to walk back to my friend's house. after things cooled off. And the police forcefully detained me. They basically tortured me for an hour, throwing me in the back of squad cars. They put so many bruises and injuries on me that because of my pre-existing medical condition of high blood pressure and asthma, by the time they brought me to the VA hospital in St. Petersburg, Florida, the doctors had to keep me there for 5 extra days. Otherwise, I would have died because the levels of toxicity in my kidneys were so bad that I could, if I had walked out of the hospital thinking that everything's all right, I could have dropped dead from heart attack, aneurysm, stroke, all that. So they literally had to keep me, even though, because I'm a Marine, I've served in the United States military, so I know how to take a beating. You know what I'm saying? I was on the streets. I know how to take I know how to take an ass whooping. So by the next day, I was like, yo, let me get, I'm saying, I know I'm all banged up, but let me go home, let me get out of here. And they're like, no, Mr. Show, we can't. You got to stay here because if you walk out of here, you could just drop dead. So yeah, the cops beat me to within an inch of my life. But even that being said, when I turn on the news this morning and I watch more of the videos, what do you think the first thing I thought is when I saw those ICE and Border Control agents, when I saw their name tag that's on their vest and on the back? I immediately had respect for that title, for their position as federal law enforcement agents. You know what I'm saying? So ask yourself this before, if you're watching this video and you're thinking about taking to the streets and protesting the Trump administration's overreach into municipalities and Democratic led states and cities across our country, like Chicago, New York. Oh yeah, by the way, they just arrested, ICE just detained a New York City Council employee, a guy who worked for the United States, for the New York City's council board. They detained him because he had overstayed his work visa in 2017, and they want to hold him accountable for that, even though he's been in the country ever since, and he hasn't broken any laws any since. ICE is also claiming that he does have an arrest warrant he had a previous arrest warrant for an assault, but the details are murky there. But yeah, they're doing their job, but to what degree? I mean, this guy has been basically, besides one fuck up, you know what I'm saying? Overstaying the guy was from Venezuela. He overstayed it, and obviously 2017, I don't think any of us would want to live in Venezuela. So basically what he did is almost equivalent to, running a stoplight. Not a stop sign, but a stoplight. And the reason why I say that is because if he was a productive citizen, paying taxes, you know what I'm saying, not breaking any laws, being a productive member of society, then why can't he just get a slap on the wrist like everybody else and just, you know what I'm saying? He ain't taking more of America's resources than what he's putting in. You know what I'm saying? You can't say that he's lazy because he's been working the whole time. But back to a previous question of those of y'all who are thinking about taking to the streets and protesting because you believe, as some of us, that the Trump administration is overstepping their authority, I want you to think about this. Do you respect law enforcement? Do you respect law enforcement agents who are doing a good job, who are not breaking the law? Because not all of them are like the cops that almost beat me to death in Florida a couple months ago. A lot of them are just like us, hardworking, got families, love America, and they're trying to do a job. And another thing I want you to ask yourself is, what would happen if we abolished ICE? Would you like that? Are you sure? I'm gonna tell you what would happen if you abolish ICE. Immigration and customs would still have to be enforced. You would still have to go after illegal immigrants in this country. People have either snuck into the country illegally or overstayed their visa. Of course, you would want to go after the violent criminals and offenders first and the ones who are selling drugs and things like that. But those apprehensions would still be taking place whether ICE is here or not. And you know who would be doing it? The local municipalities or the FBI. And their resources are already overstretched. If you watch the news, the mayor of Minneapolis said that they've already spent $52 million extra in police overtime because of all the protesting and the ramp up of the ICE immigration activities that are causing disruption in their communities. So I guess the main reason why I'm making this video, because I want this to be a warning to the average American citizen like me. This could potentially escalate to something uglier than what we've seen in the past. Yes, this could potentially escalate uglier than the joy. Now, do I think I'm a glasses half full guy? Do I think it's going to get that bad? No. Because like I said, I think most people are like me. Yeah, I may not like what the Trump administration is doing here and there. And I may not like the fact that, the Democratic municipalities in these states are not working with the federal government to increase their immigration control. And then so now you got both sides are not working with each other. You got ICE asking for help from the local police. Local police is not, get out of here. And you got police saying, get out of here. We don't want you. We can handle our own stuff. Right? But can you? Can you still fall in line with the Trump administration's ramp up of immigration where, hey, look, you overstayed your visa or you crossed over the border illegally, we know who you are, you got to go. Do you agree with sanctuary cities? Do you agree that the American taxpayer should pay more money for people who came here illegally, who are taking valuable resources from the American taxpayer to support them? Now, another point I was going to make is to answer your question, or to answer the question of, do I believe that ICE is breaking the law? I would answer that question. I'd have to look at every individual case, every individual apprehension, because there have been reports that there's been profiling going on. There have been reports that American citizens are being wrongfully detained. But as far as I've heard, in most of those instances, when they've done nothing wrong, they get released. But when you're ramping up detentions, you're gonna have more situations like what happened to me in Florida, where things escalate. In the dark of the night. You know what I'm saying? Things escalate, and and let's go back to the escalation. So let's think about what happened in the Renee Good situation. Now, I was talking to my friend, and we was talking about Monday morning quarterback. And what people like to do is they get riled up, right? They see a video on the news of this woman getting shot. She's just like, she's an average, middle class American woman. Saying her and her wife, they don't like ICE. They were there. But you got to look at all the backstories. There's so much backstory to what happened in that situation, and we're learning the facts as they come out. The backstory of her and her wife, they were using their car to disrupt ICE's operations. That's where the situation began that day. So they were already agitating federal agents and doing their duty. And on their side, what they was doing was, you could tell. I mean, let's be honest. She more than likely wasn't trying to killed the federal agent who walked in front of her car, she was trying to bolt out of there. But I wasn't in her mind. It's possible in the heat of the moment. Yeah, maybe she just wanted to kind of run him over, like push him out of the way. But you could tell that she was trying to get out of there, right? Like I said, I don't know. I wasn't in her head. I don't know if she was actually thinking about assaulting the officer with their car. But we all know that can kill you. That is, in the heat of the moment, that is considered a deadly weapon. Now let's go to the Border Patrol agent who shot her. You don't know what this man is doing every day. And so you don't know how many situations he's had to pull his firearm to protect the life of him and his coworkers or to innocent civilians. You don't know if he's actually killed somebody. For me personally, just looking at that, like I have been shot at, so I do have experience in this situation. I'll get to that in a second, but you don't know if this guy has, had to kill somebody in a line of duty or discharge his weapon in a line of duty to protect himself. Now there was the head of DHS, Kristi Noem. She did come out and say, "Hey, look, he was dragged by a car recently in the last few months." So we do at least know of one instance where his life was on the line, serving the American people, the same ones that are protesting. He put his life on the line to protect them. So, as the facts are coming out right now, I think it's safe to say that this officer didn't wake up that day thinking, "Oh yeah, I want to bust the cap on one of these protesters' ass." I don't think that was his line of thought. Now, I don't know him personally. Like I said, same with Renee Good. I don't know what was in his head. The car was coming at him. But I can tell you that just from the evidence that we've seen, in my personal opinion, there's no reason to be taken to the streets and non-peaceful protests from the evidence that we've seen. That's right. I think that people who are passing judgment on this situation before the facts come out are not being clear-headed, and they're doing a disservice to their fellow Americans, including the leadership from the mayor of Minneapolis to the president of the United States. In my opinion, the only person that all these leaders, they should be following and saying exactly what he said was the chief of police of the Minneapolis Police Department this past weekend. I think it was Sunday. He came on towards the beginning of the press conference and he said, "Hey, look, we're still gathering the facts. We don't know, exactly what the situation was, but actually, I'm sorry. That was the Portland. There was another incident in Portland. I got it mixed up. Yes, the chief of police for the city of Portland, Oregon. There was a shooting, and two illegal immigrants were shot and detained, and I think there were protests planned because of that incident too. But what that chief of police said is what, in my opinion, every public official from the mayors to the president of the United States should be saying. We're gathering the facts. Here's what we know. And not pass judgment publicly. Not say, "Oh, it was justified," or say, "Oh, no, it wasn't." You know what I'm saying? Don't tell us what your personal opinion is unless the reporter asks you a direct question. If they ask you, "Hey, Mr. President, what do you think your opinion is?" You say, "Well, from what I can see right now, it looks to me like it might be justified, but I don't know. I don't have all the facts yet, so I don't want to pass judgment yet. But yes, to me right now, it looks like it was." You know what I'm saying? That's what elected leaders should be saying. But instead, remember, America, you elected the schoolyard bully to lead this country. Y'all are the ones, the 50 point something percent, 50.1 or 50.4, whatever percentage of the voters, the majority, y'all the ones who voted for somebody who leads by playing on people's anger and fear. So just like Malcolm X said, the chickens are coming home to roost. This is what you get. You know what I'm saying? This is what you get. Now, I'm over here at Fort Trumbull State Park, New London, Connecticut. And part of the reason why I decided to come here to do this podcast, give my comments, is this fort has a lot of history. This fort was built during the Revolutionary War. I gotta double check my facts on this, so don't quote me on this, but I believe it was built during or shortly after the Revolutionary War to help protect New London and Groton County because of what happened to what happened in Fort Griswold. And the British came in, and we lost the battle, and the colonel who was in charge of Fort Griswold, Colonel Ledyard, he was ran through after they captured the fort. He was ran through in front of the rest of his men, and most of his men were killed, were captured, and the rest of his men that were alive, they were took as prisoners of war. So they built Fort Trumbull to make sure that never happened again if we were ever attacked. And they ramped up the fortifications during the Civil War. I don't think that this fort had seen any action during the Civil War because most of the fighting during the Civil War was below the Mason-Dixon line. So I don't think they ever saw action. But now the fort is more of just like a historic state park where people just come to look at history. So it was never actually really used in battle. And that's what I'm hoping for. That's what I'm hoping that all the fucking hot spots going on in this world today, from Yemen to Gaza to Tehran, to Venezuela, Ukraine. Let's not forget what's going on. Malaysia. You got hot spots all over the world where it ain't safe to go out in the streets during the day. Don't take for granted what we have here. This is why there are a lot of people out there like me who believe that it's okay to spend that much money on defense. You know why? Because my kids are sleeping safe at night. Is there any other way to do it? What do you think is going to happen if we really start fighting at each other's throats? That's what Russia and China want. If we lose faith and trust overall in our government to the point where we're descending into mass anarchy, you know what I'm saying? Because we have no more respect for our own federal law enforcement that are supposedly trying to protect us every day. What can happen to America? Yeah. You could turn into that big pussy that's about to get fucked. That could happen. Now, like I said, I'm a glasses half full type of guy, so I hope that doesn't happen. But if I could give any words of wisdom, it would be that peaceful protests and voting work. The Martin Luther King, Gandhi, way of peaceful protesting, instead of physically obstructing law enforcement, works. And physically obstructing law enforcement from doing a job is not peaceful. So please remember that. Any of you guys who are thinking about taking to the streets and exercising your First Amendment rights, remember, your First Amendment right ends when you obstruct law enforcement in a public space. So, once again, love y'all. Really praying and hoping for peace, hoping that we'll not see any more of our fellow Americans dying over this. Stay on.